nice comfy chair.
Just going to mic up there. Hello everybody, thanks for coming.
Can you hear us okay?
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's pretty good for a Monday night. Can you hear me? Yeah. Quick introduction, I'm DJ Food, hello, thanks for coming. I've known Matt for about 10 years now. I've been a fan of his music since the 80s. And when you meet somebody you're a fan of this much, you know, a musical hero, should we say. First thing you want to do is you want to just pump them for all the information, all the little bits and pieces that they've done over the years of the music you've loved. But, you know, you don't want to be that guy, you don't want to be that fan, you don't want to be that, you want to be a bit cool and, you know. So, you know, I held off a little bit, and then when Matt called me and said, do you want to talk to me for an hour and a half about soul mining, you know, I thought, yeah, okay, that could work, you know.
Well, Kev is a very cool customer, though.
I try.
Yeah.
But, so we're going to just talk about a little bit of pre-soul mining, but go through the history a little bit, go through the album, maybe do a sort of track by track thing, and then catch up with what Matt's been doing so far, you know, up to date since you retired from the music industry about 12 years ago, which I didn't even know about till the other day. So welcome Matt Johnson.
Thank you very much. Do you want a little bit of reverb on your voice?
Yes, that would be nice. Yeah. You got a good chair there, haven't you? It's quite nice.
I did request 2 comfy chairs, but they only brought 1.
Yeah, and you've got
very nice, very nice.
So just starting, going back to, I think it was 76. I've got 3 pages of notes here. I'm going to try and erase through them, but it might take a while.
The thing is, Kev knows more about soul mining than me now, so you can fill in the gaps in my memory.
So about late 77, 78, you put an ad in the NME for some like-minded people to form a band. I don't think you had a name back then.
No.
So obviously that was, you know, just past punk or in the middle of punk.
Yeah, past punk.
What was your take on all that? Was that why you put the ad in?
I never liked punk. My older brother Andrew was a punk, and I've mentioned this before, but he was one of the original punks, actually. He was at the 100 Club to see the Sex Pistols, and he used to bring all this interesting music back. But the only punk that I really liked was Sex Pistols. There was a fantastic bootleg album, I can't remember the name of it now, but I really liked that, and The Clash. But the rest of it I found sort of like the herd mentality, you know, they all dress up the same, listen to the same music, most of the music sounded the same, but they would say, you know, we just want to be different. You get a similar thing today, I suppose.
But you saw them back then, or you would?
I did go to. I didn't see the Sex Pistols. I saw the Clash, but I was more interested in. Then Andrew started to turn me on to some interesting music from New York. You know, Television, Patti Smith, early Talking Heads. And I really liked that. It was far more interesting to me. And also, around about that time, we had this very interesting period in British music, which is referred to as, you know, post-punk. There's this sort of laziness to attach these labels to everything, but the post-punk, and I mentioned before, they were big influences on me, the bands like Cabaret Voltaire, Throbbing Gristle, and my old friend Thomas Lear, Robert Rental, and from America, bands like The Residents. So this was fantastic to me. I was working in a recording studio at the time. And most of my colleagues, apart from a fellow called Colin Lloyd Tucker, who I work with, he's still a very good friend of mine, but most of them, during the lunch hour, would put on things like the Eagles and Tom Petty, and I thought it's so boring, this music. But Colin turned me on to Velvet Underground. I remember the very first Velvet Underground song I heard was What Goes On. It was the exact same moment I smoked my first joint when I was 15. So those two memories are entwined in my mind. But I couldn't figure out, was it Lou Reed's guitar or John Cowell's keyboard player, that fantastic solo in What Goes On. So music like that I was getting exposed to really was opening me up to all sorts of things. So that period of time was a fantastic, very fertile time in not just British popular music, but American as well.
And what were you into? What were you brought up with? What were your parents playing?
Well, my Uncle Kenny, some of you may know, was East London's top music promoter in the 60s. He promoted from Jerry Lee Lewis, Gene Vincent, The Kinks, The Who. And a lot of these bands played in my parents' pub in the Two Puddings, so we were very exposed to music. I've used the phrase coming up through the floorboards, but it literally was, you know, our mum would put us to bed and we'd be hearing all this music coming up. And our favourite album, though, which we got later on in the 60s, was the Beatles' White Album. Loved that album, me and my brothers, and we just played it and played it and played it because it was so varied.
Very eclectic.
And years later, of course, found out, well, lots of, they weren't even in the studio at the same time together. They were falling out. It was the low points between the personalities. But I didn't realise that as a kid, of course. I just thought, this is incredible that one band can be over here, then over there, then over there. So that was the biggest single influence on me.
Because John Lennon was a big influence as a songwriter, wasn't he?
Yeah, huge influence. Not just him as a songwriter, but also his political view. You know, he's... and a phrase that stuck in my mind of his was tell the truth and make it rhyme, you know, and that is something that I try to, you know, keep close to my heart. But, you know, just as a public figure, you know, he really, interestingly, his voice, his use of effects in the studio was quite an influence, particularly my early, you know, Burning Blue Soul era, but of course then I found out years later the reason he put so many effects on his voice because he hated his voice, which seems crazy really, because he had such a fantastic voice. But in his mind, he was a Liverpudlian lad, and he was comparing himself to Elvis Presley. And if you listen to those early Sun recordings, Elvis's voice is just sensational. Or Roy Orbison, all those guys had astonishing voices. So I suppose from John Lennon's point of view, he probably thought, God, I'm never going to be able to sing as good as those guys. Make my voice sound like I'm talking through a telephone and put lots of echo on it, because he was embarrassed. Interesting.
So where were you going out at the end of the 70s and early 80s? What sort of venues?
Oh, everywhere. But where Dwarf was next in Wardour Street, next to the old Marquee Club. So I was in there all the time. There was a lot of interesting underground venues. I remember seeing Throbbing Gristle in a place called The Crypt beneath the church. And so these unusual venues that you go to, they're the sort of places I really liked. You know, there was a sense that. A real sense of the counterculture. It's interesting, actually. We've just passed Glastonbury weekend, but how Glastonbury has become so absorbed into the establishment now, almost as much a part of the establishment calendar as Wimbledon, really, isn't it? And you have the BBC and the Guardian and everybody's down there. And I just think, you know, if you want to be radical today, I think obviously first thing you do is you disconnect from corporate mainstream media. Second thing you do is you quit drinking alcohol. Very hard for some of you here. And the third thing, you don't get a tattoo. If you want to be a real radical.
All those with tattoos can leave now.
Yes, but most of my friends have them now. So.
You get a job with a tattoo now, can't you? It's quite easy. It's
just what you want to invest in for the future is tattoo removal. It's going to be a booming business.
So coming into the 80s, you've got what's now termed cold wave, lots of synthesizer things. And
was it termed cold wave?
Well, it
wasn't at the time, but
no.
Retrospectively.
Yeah, what do you want to call it? Synth pop or futurism?
Well, there was futurism. There was the New Romantics, which was nothing to do with me. The guys in pantaloons and all that stuff. Futurism, I think that's something that Steve-O, one of my former managers, he had a futurist chart, I think, with sounds, and I don't. Who would be considered? Would it be bands like Spiz Oil and Fad Gadget and?
I think so. Even early Duran Duran and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that was
Spandau
Ballet. Again, it wasn't really my.
No, it wasn't what you were identifying.
No.
You were sort of more in This Heat, Wire, that kind of.
Yeah,
early Squidbility.
Yeah, and I knew a lot of those guys, and that's where my interest. Right, that was more interesting to me.
But a lot of those guys were doing cassettes, and I'm sure a lot of people know this here, but some might not. That your first record was a cassette, wasn't it?
Yeah,
cassettes
are coming back. I think they sell them here now, don't they? I love cassettes. I still play cassettes. And when I got my first cassette player, when I was a little boy of 12 or 13, another album that was a big influence on me, my Uncle Kenny bought it for me. There was a film called Stardust. Do you remember Stardust? David Essex was in it, and it was a fantastic soundtrack of all these brilliant 60s songs. And I think it was the first time I heard All Along the Watchtower, and Jimi Hendrix's guitar solo just blew me away, and Procol Harum, White Shaded Power. Beautiful songs. I didn't really know those songs until I got that cassette. But then I got a cassette player, and of course at all of our rehearsals, my little band I had when I was about 11 called Roadstar, I would take it with me everywhere, this cassette player. So I loved cassettes. And of course when it came to do an album, I mean, I was 16, it was impossible for me to afford to, I was on £18 a week, believe it or not. It was impossible for me to get it pressed up on vinyl, so I duplicated loads of cassettes at DeWolf, photocopied the little cover, used to go to gigs and sell it.
Yeah, so we're talking about Soul Mining, which is generally believed to be the debut The Other album, but there's actually 4 albums before that.
Yeah, that's the 5th album.
there's a cassette used to sell at gigs, and there's a couple of unreleased ones, and then there's obviously Burning Blue Soul, which is under your own name, but that was on 4AD, wasn't it? So
yeah.
Why was that under your own name?
Well, at the time, there was sort of a band, really. There was a chap called Keith, who was a lovely guy. He was the first member of and he'd actually suggested the name, and there was Tom Johnston, who was managing us. There was Peter Ashworth, played some drums.
Who went on to be a famous photographer.
Yeah, he was a very famous music and fashion photographer, Peter. So it was changing all the time, and as I've said before, for those guys it was a hobby, but it wasn't for me, you know, and so they were sort of coming and going. And at the same time that I'd had the rough band lineup together, Ivo, who I'd worked with to do the Controversial Subject single, said, look, do you want to do an album? And so I decided to, I thought I was going to keep the going with the other members as another project, and I put it under my own name. But to be honest, by that stage I was playing everything myself and writing everything myself, and it should have been under the. And the reason I went back and retitled it was because I wanted it to be with its siblings. It was by itself, you know, in the shelves, and I thought it has to be with the other albums. So that's
no, I agree, definitely.
Yeah.
So you started recording what would eventually become Soul Mining in '82, I think. How old were you then?
21. Actually, yeah, 20 I was, because I started recording it in New York. So I was 20. And then 21, you know, the album that people know as Soul Mining that was released, I was 21.
But by this time you had a deal with London, was it?
Yeah, there was an interesting situation because I thought I'd signed to London, which, to be honest, I didn't like London very much, because when I go to the offices, Steve-O had signed B-Movie to, I think, Phonogram, and they didn't really want Soft Cell, but they ended up with Soft Cell, and obviously Soft Cell became massively successful. The biggest band in the world at that time. And because of his influence at the record company, he said, look, you know, I'd like you to... So, and they seemed a bit begrudging. They were never that friendly to me up in the offices. I was sort of like a pest, I suppose. And they begrudgingly... He managed to do this deal where he got them to fly me to New York to work with Mike Thorne, who was... Soft Cell and Wires producer, put me up in a nice hotel, but without signing anything, which is crazy, really, if you think about it. And so I
signed anyone in those days, didn't they?
Well, yeah. So I ended up over there, and you know, I thought I was with London, and of course we did it was a very successful session. Mike was a very nice man. It went very well. Came back, and of course. Steve-O obviously knew what he was doing the whole time, because he then just took it round to everybody for a bidding war. CBS came in with a much better offer. And to me, anyone here football fans? Not really, yeah, sort of. Some of you are. I sort of am and aren't, but my team is Manchester United. I'm a Cockney Red. Yeah, exactly. But I did support them for when I was 7, so... But to me, it was like Manchester United coming to sign me. I was very, very excited, because a lot of my favourite artists were on there, like Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, and Johnny Cash. And they were very friendly. They were nice to me. And the lawyer there, John Kennedy, who became my lawyer later on, I lived in a little bedsit in Highbury, and he would give me lifts all the time, and he used to love my music, and he'd be so excited about it in detail. And I thought, God, if the lawyers are like this at CBS, and yet the A&R men at London are hostile, I know where I want to go. and it was for CBS.
So London basically paid for a very elaborate demo for Steve-O to walk around.
Yeah, they did. And in fact, they went to great lengths to try to stop it. They tried to buy the publishing from Cherry Red to stop the record coming out. They were very, very upset, understandably.
So you're recording in '82 what would be the Those debut album, which was at that time called The Pornography of Despair, which never came out, as I'm sure most The fans know, or came out in versions or variations on B-sides.
Yeah.
And you were doing Uncertain Smile then, and Perfect, and things like that. And there's a history in your work of you reworking things, isn't there? You seem to not be able to settle on a definitive version.
I'm better these days because I don't do any recordings. Well, I do, but Pornography of Despair.
What made you go back and
CBS asked me because Uncertain Smile was obviously in its embryonic form released as a single called Cold Spell Ahead, and obviously that was transformed into a very commercial sounding record. And I suppose CBS were then, okay, well, what else have you got that you can so I played this, rough mixes of the Pornography of Despair, and they said, well, why don't you go back in the studio and rework those, make them commercial as well. And some of the tracks I did, like Perfect, for instance, that was originally from Pornography of Despair, but some of the other ones, and I was never happy with it. It was neither here nor there. The original was much more like sort of more like Burning Blue Soul, I suppose, an evolution of Burning Blue Soul. It had more grit, and it was a bit more passionate. This sounded a bit flat, probably because it's very hard to... You've probably heard of something called what used to be known as demo-itis, where you would work on a demo, and then you would have to go back to redo it, and you could never recapture the magic. So to me, I was already mentally moved on from that album, and I didn't really want to... it just didn't sound right to me. So they came out as B-sides, the re-recordings came out as B-sides, and I wanted to focus on...
being a pop star?
No, writing Soul Mining. No, being a pop star was never that high up the agenda. Really.
It's a massive jump when you listen to the Pornography tracks and then you get to Soul Mining, I think. In production quality, definitely.
Yeah. Well, a large part of the credit has to go to Paul Hardiman, who I can't find. I've been trying to locate. If anyone knows where he is.
If he's not on Facebook, he doesn't exist.
Exactly. We've got a nice box set for him. But Paul was fantastic. Great guy. Sonically he was very, very good. But he's a very, very funny guy. Great fun to work with. Because when you're locked up in a studio, contrary to what may come across with my albums, most of the time actually we're laughing and joking in the studio. It sounds strange.
That is the thing with Matt, is actually he's got a very, very dark sense of humour. The records is one side, but he's a perpetual joker.
Yeah. So not as bad as I used to be. I have mellowed out and grown up a bit, but there was a lot of fun, because if you're locked in a room with people, you want to make sure you can have fun together. And Paul was a lot of fun, and brilliant engineer, and we co-produced it together because at that stage, I knew what I wanted with this album, where I wanted to go with it. I was very, very pleased.
And that room was the garden, wasn't it? The studio that you later bought.
Yeah, that's right. It was built by... In fact, if any of you listen to the Radio Cineola broadcast, I'm finishing off one called The Ghosts of Gardens Past. And it's me talking to a lot of people that worked at the garden, down in the garden, when we closed it down, and it was halfway through demolition. We had John Fox down there, Jim Thirlwell, Zeke Van Yeek, DC Collard, Tim Pope,
Thomas Lear.
Thomas wasn't down in the little party that we did, unfortunately. But so the Garden Studio was a very, very big part of my career, and particularly Soul Mining. John Fox built it for himself in 1981, and unfortunately for him, he did such a lovely job building a musician studio. He didn't intend for it to be a commercial studio, but every band wanted to get in there. He couldn't get in there anymore, and he had to build himself another studio. Everyone was, in those days, Depeche Mode and Madness, Teardrop Explode, Susie and the Banshees. It was like a roll call of British music. And years later, I bought it for myself.
And what kind of gear did they have in there? Because what did you have? You mustn't kind of had too much, or did you spend your advance on gear? Or
Not that kind of gear.
not that kind of gear. Come on. That was later.
I didn't have much gear in those days, actually. I had, I think, a John Birch guitar, Fender Strat guitar, a Suzuki Omnichord.
Did you write on guitar or piano?
Well, different songs. I think This Is the Day and Perfect Nature of Virtue, I wrote on the Omnichord. Uncertain Smile was written on guitar. Giant was written on keyboards. I probably based it around the bass riff. That was probably the first thing that I wrote. Waiting for Tomorrow, again, that was based around on the bass riff. Soul Mining on guitar, so it varied really. And a few foot pedals, like the wah wah, echo and fuzz, not much stuff. And the Garden itself, compared to studios these days, it had an AMEC desk, it had a 24 track, some AMS delays, reverb, URI compressors, DVX compressors. That was about it. A decent mic collection, but a fantastic library.
And you had to be quick. You had how long in there? I mean, how long did the album take to record?
No, I don't think. I think at that stage, I mean, it was like Burning Blue Soul was made for £1,800, so I had to be quick then, you know. But I finally had the luxury to take my time to bring in session musicians and really take a good amount of time. I can't remember. I'd like to find out how long. I mean, as my career went on, I took longer and longer in the studio, wasted so much money that I never got any royalties because I spent it, unfortunately. Yeah.
But you had all the songs written before you actually went into the studio, so you kind of knew what you were doing.
Yeah, but I was with songs like Giant and Waiting for Tomorrow. The method of composition is what I term a loop mode style of composition, which is quite popular now. With that, you have MIDI software. It's very, very easy to chop stuff around, but in those days it wasn't, because we didn't have sequencers. It was all analog to analog tape. So I would record. For instance, I would do a click track for 10 minutes. Then, in the case of Giant, I probably put down, it could have been a Linn drum actually on that. I can't remember the drum machine. Then I put the bass line down. Then I built it up with the different keyboard parts, playing the same part again and again and again, which is why I've got a very bad hand stroke.
Yeah, limited signing ladies.
Doing soul mining, I screwed it up. And then, of course, you would edit via the mixing desk and mute buttons. So you'd be on the chopping things in and out. And of course, later on it became easier because of automation. But then it was very physical. It was a very sort of Lee Scratch Perry route, you know, just all hands on deck, pushing everything.
Dubbing, basically.
Out. Yeah, dubbing. So those songs were sort of really creations of the studio, whereas Uncertain Smile was more song-based, songwriter-based.
So getting into the album now, I'm going to do a sort of track-by-track thing. You've got Waiting for Tomorrow. I've been waiting for tomorrow all my life at the start, which is a killer opening, you know, a very angry song.
With the missing number 7, magic number. Everyone always asks.
With the countdown at the start.
Countdown.
Yeah.
And there's a reason the 7 is missing, but I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, the magic number 7.
The magic number 7.
And you've got Zeke on drums there, haven't you? Zeke Manika.
Yeah.
He was drumming for Orange Juice.
He was going to be here tonight, but he's customarily keeping African time, so he's probably going to be very late or not show up.
You said he was late every time, didn't you?
Yeah, he was. But you know, I love Zeke, so you'd put up with it. But when we started the first session, I think it was, I can't remember which track it was. He was 3 days late, and so Paul Hardiman was getting quite fed up. Didn't believe that Zeke existed. So he did show up eventually, and we did, Waiting for Tomorrow. I think that was the first thing we did, and you really hear the live room of the Garden in that. It's
heavy drums on that.
Yeah.
Was that looped up or played live?
No, played live.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Thomas Lear's on that as well, I think, playing keyboards.
Yeah. It was great to get Thomas involved because, as I said, he'd been a big influence on me and someone that I'd liked. And in fact, going back, slightly rewinding from Soul Mining, I did the Marquee concerts, where I put together a super group, and a super group of post-punk ne'er-do-wells, really. And I was pleased to play the Marquee because I'd spent so much time. I don't know if anybody remembers the old Marquee in Wardour Street, but did you ever go backstage and they had, the signatures, everything was drawn on over there, and I thought, gotta write over all this. It was great, I really wanted to be part of that history. And so, of course, got Thomas Lear, Zeke, Jim Thirlwell, Mark Harmond, Mal from Cabaret Voltaire, Edwin from Orange Juice. So it's a whole group of really interesting people. And so, carrying on from that, I decided to bring across 3 of the people that were at those concerts. Of course, one of them was Thomas, one was Zeke, and one was Jim.
Mm. And it's a pretty angry song. I was wondering about the lyrics earlier. I was trying to read.
Remember though, I was 21.
Yeah.
Weren't you angry when you were 21?
Oh, I was fuming.
Yes. And did you write about it?
I didn't actually, no.
Yeah, there you go.
I used to write on walls, graffiti, that was my way of
Good
writing.
therapy to write and sing about.
From what I can understand, it's a tirade against people and society, which is quite, description of quite a lot of your songs, really.
Well, I don't know, but if you think of the lyric filled up with useless information spewed out by papers and radio stations, I still feel the same. That's why I said switch off corporate propaganda. Get your news from various sources, because it's still, I had to give up listening to the Today programme at Radio 4. I had to throw the radio out the window because I'm sick of the lies and the misinformation. So I still react to that. I don't necessarily sing and dance about it anymore.
But you've also got the people I looked up to are no longer there. I've been hounded by fair weather friends sowing the seeds for my discontent. Is that specific?
I think people I looked up to are no longer there is a reference to, I hadn't thought about this for years, to John Lennon being killed, actually.
Ah.
Yeah, that's what that would have been.
That would have been just a few years before.
Yeah, because that really did affect me, him getting assassinated. And in terms of the fair weather friends, I don't know. I mean, it also depends, in your mood, one's mood, depends what mood you're in when you write a lyric. Some days I feel absolutely in a splendid mood and love everybody, and other days there's this sort of vague sense of irritation, I suppose.
Well, my favourite lyric is, and I think about this once a year, a new year is another year over and what have I done?
Well, that is also a reference to John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Happy Christmas, war is over.
Mm.
So often in my lyrics I would reference other things, either my own lyrics or other songs or songwriters that I admire. There'd just be little references in there. But I would also feel that. But it seems strange now thinking about it. I was only 21. I was very ambitious when I was younger. And so people think, it's a very mature album. From my point of view, I was a 10-year veteran. I was in bands from the age of 11. I felt very experienced. Just wanted to get on with things. And it seems crazy now looking back to think, Christ, you're 21, you've got all this time in front of you. Chill out, calm down, it's okay.
And we were talking the other month when H.R. Giger died. Do you remember the Swiss artist?
Yes.
If you go on YouTube, type in I've been waiting for tomorrow all my life, H.R. Giger, and you'll see a great little video of Matt in the H.R. Giger Museum, I think it's in Switzerland, in Gruyere.
Yeah.
What was that for?
It would have been for Swiss television. It was odd in those days because, particularly with this album, I learnt a lot during the promotion of this. I found myself in all sorts of strange situations, like sort of children's shows and something like carnival acts would come on.
Alien chairs.
Alien
in
chairs.
Switzerland.
And you're very, a kid and very naive and very trusting, and you get put in all these sort of situations that, in later years I would flatly refuse. And so there's all sorts of videos, unfortunately, of me on kids' shows or whatever, because I didn't know what was going on half the time. I thought, it's great, it'll be good. Because I refused to tour, you see. And so I had to play willing in terms of other promotion, because I was under a lot of pressure. Go on the road. I'm like, I don't want to go on the road. And so I had to compromise I did a lot of interviews, I did hundreds probably, and TV appearances.
But how would you actually reproduce that album live on the road anyway?
Well, we couldn't in those days.
It
It would have been too expensive. It would have required a lot of tour support and 12 musicians or something. So nowadays you could with samplers, but in those days you couldn't. And in fact, it was really written for bedrooms. It was created for people to listen by themselves in their bedroom. Nice.
You can tell that from the lyrics, can't you? There's lots of sitting around laying on beds looking at ceilings.
Exactly. But I think that's really underestimated. And there's this obsession with live performance and going on the road. And I've done hundreds of gigs since I was a kid, so it's not an issue for me. But I also love the environment of the recording studio, and I loved I actually preferred listening to records in my bedroom than going to gigs. And I went to hundreds of gigs. So I suppose it's my preference. I think I'd want to make records for people listening, to listen to records the way that I used to listen to records, very intensely in my bedroom, reading the liner notes. That was the intention. It wasn't about strutting around on stages with flashing lights.
Yeah, I can sympathise with that. So This Is the Day is the next track. That leads pretty perfectly on for I've Been Waiting for Tomorrow all my life, because the message is dovetails out of the end of that, doesn't it? This is the day your life will surely change. Is that intentional or just accidental?
No, put a lot of thought into the running orders of all the albums. In fact, that's a sad thing in a way with
these kids today.
No, like my eldest son. But with the iPod generation and the shuffle, I suppose we all do it, and you program, but
we all shuffle.
Put it on endless repeat, and it's become like oral wallpaper in a way. But band, well, I did. I'm sure most other bands are the same. Put a huge amount of thought and attention into the running order. Obviously, your first track, but things like the second to last track on side one, and then the final track on side one, and the opening track on side two.
What's that?
Yes, and then of course the final track, which we will get onto later.
We'll get onto that later.
Because there's a lot of port. So Giant was supposed to finish the album, and of course, we can
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
So yes, a lot of thought went into it. It's not accidental.
So This Is the Day. The message of that, it's a rumination on time and age, and
Yeah, again.
You're writing quite deep lyrics for a 20, 21-year-old.
Yeah.
Quite experienced for that young age.
Well, I didn't mention I think there was the interview I did with the Quietus was quite a long interview, and I spoke about what I referred to as an emotional hothouse experience, which derived from the fact my mum wouldn't let me have a moped. And I was fuming at the time, because all my friends had mopeds. And I got very cut off. I was a very sociable young lad, and suddenly all my friends, all my gang mates were off on these Yamaha FS1Es, and I was left in my bedroom looking out the window. My mum said, because a kid had had a bad accident, and I'm actually the same now with my oldest son, it's dangerous out there, there's a lot of accidents. So anyway, I was cut off, but then I got into my tape recorders and long walks and reading, and it was a very, very intense period. Very, very intense, and I describe it as slipping into a parallel universe, and I say that only half jokingly because it changed me so fundamentally as a person. I started to sense things and see things that I couldn't see before. So that moment of extreme annoyance
isolation
and irritation, it led to the isolation, which changed me for the better as a person. And again, of course, there was those several albums before this album, so I already felt older than my years by the time I come to do this.
And you use things like accordion and fiddle on that track, which I don't know about the rest of the audience here, but I personally hate those instruments. The sound of them is awful, but you tend to you do this with harmonica, all this sort of stuff that I wouldn't listen to twice, but you tend to do something good with it.
Yeah, I love those reed instruments, particularly harmonica, melodica. I've always loved, and accordion. Just found them very, very warm. I suppose it was also a bit of a reaction to you mentioned cold wave and the sort of synthetic instrumentation that many of my contemporaries would have been using.
Yeah, very uncool to use.
Well, that's why I liked it. You see, people are frightened I find increasingly frightened to swim against the tide, to break away from the herd. And what I mentioned earlier on, half joking, about the sort of the tattoos and the Glastonbury becoming part of the mainstream, it's an interesting, I find it interesting to observe. You see this sort of tidal wave and everyone gets caught up in it, and they think that they're being individual, but they're not. And so it's very important, I think, whatever you do in life, whoever you are, to really find time for your own intuition and really be, independent-minded enough to be able to break away from the herd, even if that means using accordions or uncool instruments, because you can use things in really interesting contexts as well.
Well, it's become part of your sound palette, I think, things like that.
Marimbas as well.
Marimbas,
I always enjoyed, and Xylimbers.
Very sweet. I mean, it's almost a little anthem. That it's a very understated anthem. Sort of pump your fist, does it? This is the day.
Yeah, well, it's. I like to think of it as an anthem of hope, because it is a hopeful song. I mean, people try to say, well, it's ironic. It's not really, but it actually is. You know, and strangely enough, I am quite an optimistic person in life, generally. You know,
don't put it on your record.
Well, what it is, no, I think most people are good people. My problem, as anybody that knows me and knows all my notes, has always been with the controlling elite, the corporate oligarchy that control everything. 90%, 95, 98% of people are good people that would help you if you got a problem, and that's where I get my hope from. Where the other stuff comes from, the negativity comes from, is seeing, you know, we're being largely sort of lied to, controlled, misrepresented, and it's an anger that I feel about that. But so I try to create the balance, a sweetness in some of the songs that makes the pill easier to swallow.
Well, that's the thing about this album, is lyrically it's quite down, it's quite depressive and negative in places, but musically it's joyous and uplifting, you know. So I think the balance is perfect, really.
Good, yeah.
But we'll get on to perfect later.
Yeah.
From the hope of this is the day, we get to the sinking feeling.
Yes.
I'm just a symptom of moral decay that's gnawing at the heart of the...
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I remember writing that in the little bedsit in Highbury that I shared with my friend Alessandra, who may or may not be here tonight as well. And of course, this was the beginning of the, or close to the beginning, I suppose, of the Thatcherite era. It was shortly after the Falklands War, and of course, she then got her mandate to really do what she wanted to do. And yeah, I mean, it's hard.
It's about the most political track on the album.
Yeah, I suppose it is. That and Waiting for Tomorrow, probably. Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt at the time, you know.
My wife has cousins in Switzerland, and they used to listen to that when they were their teens in the 80s, and they speak French, obviously, and they say, what's he saying? What's he saying? It's such a beautiful song. She would just refuse to translate. So, do you still feel raped by progress?
Yes. The corruption in the planning process around, I mean, I don't know if anybody here is interested in planning and the London plan. Yeah, I mean, you see this...
Gentrification you're talking about?
Well, not just gentrification. I mean, gentrification can have a positive side in terms of the restoration of old, interesting buildings. I think that's wonderful when they get preserved. What's worrying is we've got, I think, something like 230 skyscrapers now on the conveyor belt. You know, I've been involved for a number of years working with local campaign groups, conservation groups, trying to fight this and trying to stand up for the local community, but you are fighting a losing battle. There's so much money involved. You know, and you can't point the finger and use the C word, because you can't corruption.
Not
because you can't or that you can't prove it. But there's either extreme incompetence or corruption going on, because it goes against the wishes. If, for instance, just close to where we are now, there was a nice old building called the Fruit and Wool Exchange. We're going off the track a bit here, of course, but
it's all relevant.
It's all relevant because the local community and Tower Hamlets rejected the developer's scheme. I think not once but twice. But due to this thing called the London Plan, the developer is then able to go to the Mayor, Boris Johnson, and have it called in, who then rubber stamped it and pushed it through. So over the heads of the local community and the local authority, that's what's new. And guess who the main tenant is going to be there? Rupert Murdoch. Ooh. So these things, yeah, I do feel, you know, personally, my life is pretty good. I've been very fortunate in my life. I do what I want and go where I want, and so it's more a sense of outrage on behalf of the community, I feel. You know, we're supposed to live in a communal society, in a democracy, and I feel that it's being short-circuited by people with, you know, their hand on the levers of power. Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to the...
Uncertain Smile is next, which is pretty much the centrepiece of the record, really. If you take the original running order, the 7 tracks. Is it a love song?
Yeah. unrequited love, unrequited passion, and yeah, in those days, you know, I wouldn't want to feel like that anymore. When I was younger, I believe it or not, I used to be quite shy when I was younger. Shy. I was shy when I was younger. I'm not shy anymore. But that feeling, that unrequited feeling, that feeling of yearning, which can lead to some interesting artistic endeavours and songs and films and poetry, but I wouldn't want to feel like that anymore. To feel these pointless infatuations.
And you recorded it, you obviously recorded it before the album with the flute version, but for the LP you got Jools Holland.
Well, it was Cold Spell Ahead, of course, originally, and then it got, you know, it had a strange, there was an ending to that track, Cold Spell Ahead, where the time signature and the tempo changed, and I kind of liked that ending, but it didn't really work. And then, of course, I re-demoed it. There's another version which I can't find, which I'm trying to find, which is the version that is in between Cold Spell Ahead and the New York version, which is closer to the New York version, which is, in fact, it was the strength of that London sent me to New York. It wasn't on Cold Spell Ahead, it was this other demo.
But what made you record it again with Jools? Well, I mean, why did you think of Jools? What was?
Well, I think with Paul we decided, because the album would have been quite patchworky sonically if I'd then stuck on the New York version of Uncertain Smile, because Paul had a different sound. It was the sound that I wanted at the time, a bit harder, a bit crunchier, livelier. And we redid the song in the garden, and the garden had this wonderful live room, but it also had this beautiful piano, a Yamaha C3 baby grand piano, which is beautiful sounding piano in a beautiful room. So it was just sat there, and of course we knew we had to use the piano on something.
She thought, Jools Holland?
No, I didn't think of it actually. I think it was Annie Roseberry, my A&R lady at Epic. I didn't know Jools Holland. And we asked around, we said, can you suggest some good pianists? And she suggested him, and we said, fine, okay, we'll try him out. And of course, the true story is, it was a very hot summer's day. There was a knock on the door. And there was hello. And there was a man dressed in very tight leathers, sweltering.
Behind him was Jools Holland.
Yeah, exactly. And Jools came down, and very, very nice chap, very, very low key, and sat at the piano. Oh, this is nice piano. He said, can I have a playthrough? And we put the headphones on, he played it through. Didn't play the whole song, he just played it for about 2 minutes. He obviously realised it was the same 4 chords repeating to the end. And then he said, okay, I'm ready to go for it now. Are we ready to go? We said, yeah, we're ready to go. And we put it in record. And then as the song progressed and the solo, piano solo progressed, Paul Hardham and I were just looking at each other like, oh, yes. Because we just knew we had something so special, and it just built crescendo after crescendo. It was incredible. Actually, interestingly, years later, I was on the Later show.
I was going to say, and thus Later with Jools, and by default, the Hootenanny was born. Because he could play boogie woogie piano over anything then.
Have you ever seen the Hootenanny?
Once, maybe. That was enough.
Once enough.
Sorry, Jools.
But I was on his show, and he did say that he gets asked, I'm not sure if it was in irritation or it was flattery. He said, I get asked about that more than anything I've ever done, you know. And,
no royalties.
No. And we did the song on the show, but it wasn't anywhere near as good.
No.
I don't know if you... I didn't realise at the time.
Having an off day, was he?
Well, it's not so much that. It's just that if you improvise, you know, you don't know what's going to happen. But he was caught between improvising and trying to copy what he did before, and it just fell down miserably. He was all over the place. It doesn't sound good at all.
No rehearsal time or anything like that?
No, we did run it through once, but I think he'd have to learn the whole solo. But interestingly, DC Collard, who was my keyboard player for many years, he did learn the solo note for note. Anyone that would have seen us play live in, what would it have been, the Mind Bomb tour and also the Dusk tour, we had a keyboard player called DC Collard who was wonderful, and he played the piano beautifully on that. He loved that though, DC, because it meant he got all the ladies after the show. You know, that was his big moment.
So after the love song of Uncertain Smile, we flipped the record over because we're on a record here.
Yeah.
Side 2, The Twilight Hour, which is the breakup song, maybe? Lots of lying in bed
it's not
thinking?
actually.
No?
It's the beginnings of a relationship and the insecurities and the paranoia. And again, me saying about how I wouldn't want to be that person anymore. You know, those are, you know, your emotions and your hormones are all over the place. Then really, you're very, you can be very possessive and insecure. It's really a song about emotional insecurity.
Should I stay or should I go?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Or will they stay,
Yeah.
or will they go?
I like the way it switches from he doesn't need her at the beginning, or
Yeah.
you don't need her, I don't know if it's autobiographical, but to
Yeah,
you're relying on her
yeah.
for your independence.
Yeah, and which is how things often go, particularly, I suppose, young people with their texting now get enraged if people, maybe old people as well, if the text isn't returned in time. Right! That, or I don't like the tone of that text. You know, just like, what do they, particularly in an insecure fledgling relationship, it's just like, what do they mean by that? There's no smiley after that, emotional after that.
You could change it, couldn't you? It's now way past the time she usually texts.
Exactly, that's what it would be then. Yes, it's true.
We can all relate, can't we, in some way? I think of that way. So then on to Soul Mining.
Yeah.
Lyric that I pulled out is something always goes wrong when things are going right, which is a fantastic lyric. Because this is the breakup song, isn't it, really?
I don't think it is, actually. You're obsessed about people breaking up.
There's a theory to this. believe me. My theory to this is, the 3 songs, Uncertain Smile, Twilight Hour, and Soul Mining, work in tandem, one after the other. Uncertain Smile is the love song, Twilight Hour is the shall I, shan't I, and Soul Mining is the breakup.
Well, that's a good theory. I knew you would teach me something about someone. Not necessarily, but there are different stages of a relationship. But I wasn't breaking up at that point. But interesting, that lyric, in fact, I was with my dad yesterday, having lunch with him and my brother, and my dad said, oh, you know, really, you know, I find that when something good happens, I always brace myself for something horrible to happen. You know, and it's true though, isn't it, in life? How many times will you get, you know, a nice bit of money come through, like, oh, great, and then within a week you've got to buy a new boiler or the tax man or something or other happens. But it just seems to be the way of life. And it was just one of those little things that I found happening all the time, and the amount of people that agreed with me.
Yeah. Oh, you can relate to it, can't you?
Yeah.
That's what I like about the lyrical side, is everyone's been through this. You've just put it very succinctly, I think, for a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
Sickening. So now we're on to Giant, which should always be spelt with capitals. Did you know that?
Yes.
With Zeke drumming again, and our friend Jim Thirlwell on percussion, who came in and played the pots and pans in the kitchen, didn't he?
Yeah, it was...
or a ladder or something?
No, it wasn't
another
ladder.
track?
It was actually, at the marquee gigs that I mentioned earlier on, Jim had played the kitchen sink. Or him or both had. I think he had. And I think, I can't remember, we found it somewhere. We were rehearsing, wherever it was, and we saw this old kitchen sink, and we said, what a great idea, let's take it. So we would have played everything, including the kitchen sink, so we did that. So I suppose it was that in mind. I got him down and I played him Giant. I just wanted him on the album because we were very close friends, you know, and it was like having my gang around me. And Jim listened to the track and said, okay, and he wandered off into the kitchen and brought back trays, pots, pans, and found some sticks. And we didn't realise what he was doing, first of all. And then he said, well, okay, just run me the track down. And he would do the, because Jim's not really a musician, he's hard to describe, Jim, really. He's a great producer, he's a conceptualist. He doesn't really play instruments, he plays a lot of samples, but it's all going up in his mind, and he just created this fantastic syncopated rhythm before our eyes, which fitted perfectly.
And stylistically, Giant is quite a large jump, I feel, from the rest of the record, and possibly the thing that's most like Infected. There's this African feel to it, a very worldly feel, whereas the rest of the album is
It's interesting you say that. I think of Waiting for Tomorrow and Infected being quite similar because of the beat and the tempo, but on this album I do think of Waiting for Tomorrow and Giant, just because the way that they were composed, I composed them at the same time using a similar method of composition.
And what brought on the chants? What was the idea behind that?
Really, Zeke, really, you know, because the track was getting so sort of big and we just needed these other elements, really. And it's a shame he's not here, really, because
you could have a reprise of it, couldn't
we? We could. In fact, that was a difficult one to do live. We did do Giant live on the Mind Bomb tour, and unfortunately, the multi-tracks for Giant are lost. And I think
Arthur Baker has.
Yes.
Because there was going to be a remix, wasn't there,
right.
of Giant? Check this out. There was going to be a remix by Arthur Baker of Giant in '83.
Yes.
Now, what would that have been?
And I went into his studio in New York, and Arthur was there. He just sat there, with his hand down his trousers, scratching his balls, and kept me waiting for about 20 minutes.
You might be here, Matt. You might be in the audience.
Yeah, well, I'm fine with Arthur now, but at the time, I said, this is really rude. This is not very nice, keeping me waiting like that. And then he sat there like, well, maybe, you know. Didn't seem that keen. And the multi-tracks were already there with him. They sent the originals for some reason instead of copies, and it didn't happen. And we never saw the multi-tracks again. But I did bump into Arthur during Infected, at which point he approached me and said, man, I'd love to mix. I think, well, too late, Arthur. You had your chance and you blew it.
So, but lyrically, this is a little more out there. I mean, I'm scared of God and scared of hell. I'm caving in upon myself.
A lot of people think I'm a Catholic. Because there's a strong sort of religious imagery throughout, but I'm obviously a born-again agnostic. I've never been a Catholic at all.
But quite a lot of drugs going on then, at that point? Caving in upon yourself and strapped into
there would have been probably the come down. Yeah. I mean, is everybody... There was a lot of MDMA or ecstasy being consumed at this point. You know, in the Some Bizarre Circles, it was probably 5 years before most people knew about it in this country, so... It was our little trade secret.
Well, it's a very trancey track, isn't it? It's very rhythmic, 10 minutes of trance out. You know?
Yeah. It's hard to remember what I was thinking at the time. Where the inspiration come from this? I wanted something cinematic, something massive, hence the title. Also, the phrase existential blues, I suppose, could have been applied to this track as much as any of the other ones, which got attached to me later on. But this really is an existential blues track, I suppose.
And it perfectly ends the album because you've got the very long tail out, the fade out. And for me...
But I find it euphoric. Again, it's that balance, between the intensity of the lyrics and the euphoria of the music. So... unfortunately, as a songwriter, one does tend to get judged by one's lyrics more than by the music, which is, I suppose, it's an occupational hazard, really. But you can express all sorts of things through music, that words can't even express, which is why there's the old cliche, talking about music is like dancing about architecture, really, because it's a very, very hard thing to... there's all the sort of usual cliches that people come out with when they try to describe music, but music is to be experienced rather than discussed, ultimately. But the intention was to end on a euphoric note, really, which is why you're leading on.
I'm leading into the perfect being tagged onto the end, which was on the CD, but actually it was included with the original on a 12.
Yes, it was. It was there, and it was actually it was on the American release. I went over to New York, and I was wandering around the CBS offices. It was CBS in those days. That's why I say CBS, not Sony, because it was a different company in those days. And I was walking around the offices. I said, "Oh, there's the," and we used a different cover.
Again behind you.
Yeah, because I think the Americans didn't like. They're like, "Hey, what's this African woman smoking a joint? Man, it's not going to go down well over here." So we did provide them with a different cover. Then I got there and I checked and I thought, "What? Perfect stuck on the end." Like, well, and I was livid. I said, "Well, who the hell did this?" "Oh, it's Bob Feineagle, who is a rather sort of tubby American. He was a nice guy, Bob, but had no business doing that. It was outrageous, really outrageous.
It does sound tacked on and it does change the tone,
Yeah,
but
you can't do things like that.
it does fit with the rest of the album. I mean, it's
Yeah,
from
but
the same sessions.
they were from the same sessions, and maybe I actually preferred the earlier version of Perfect than this one. The New York one that I remixed with Paul Hardman. I think that's much better.
That's on the new box set, is it? On the bonus disc?
Yeah, the 12-inch version of that. But that's got more bite and more energy, more urgency. And what I was talking about earlier on, but when you go back to revisit and redo things, you never quite get the same energy and urgency that you do first time round. It's difficult going back.
But you didn't feel it fitted in with the other flow of the rest of the album? You couldn't have tucked it in?
I probably would have tried. I would have, and I just thought, I would have had good reason not to. I think the flow of the album was just right, and I think it's proven. We're sitting here 30 years later. Soul Mine, as it was intended, ended up being a good, successful record, and I'm glad I finally got it Perfect removed. It took a shoehorn to get it off that album.
A legal shoehorn.
Yeah.
Well, I think the beginning, I've been waiting for Tomorrow in My Life, is the most like Burning Blue Soul, and then Giant at the end is the most like Infected. In some ways, it's a perfect bridge between those albums, which, if you stuck them together, would be very, very different.
You mean going from Burning Blue Soul to
Infected?
Oh yeah. And in fact, people are sick of hearing about Pornography Despair. They're like, put up or shut up. And it's true. I'm sick of hearing about it
because there were extra tracks on the cassette of Soul Mining.
Yeah, and I think that is the real. It's a much smoother evolution throughout. Throughout my career. The missing links, and for instance, even things like Gunsluts as well.
But I was listening to some of the Pornography of Despair tracks that were on B-sides today, and for me they're fascinating because there's one that's a version of the Mercy Beat that was on at the end of Infected.
Is it?
Yeah.
Leap into the Wind.
Oh, Leap Into the Wind. Yes,
It's
it's got the
very-
same guitar riff.
Very
That's
early.
right. That's
you
right.
can hear the embryo in there,
Yeah. That's
and
right.
for me that's fascinating to hear what turned into later further pieces. So
Yeah.
are you're gonna release that, or you're gonna put together a version of that?
Yeah, the grittier version. I will do. Yeah, but again, I've got this sticky
Tape problem.
sticky sedge syndrome, which sounds like a communicable disease, doesn't it? Really? But, yeah. Have you been checked for? Antibiotics no longer work on it apparently. But there you go. Yeah, I've got my archive set up. I've got all the tapes out of storage, or most of them out of storage. I've recently taken delivery of a dried fruit dehydrator.
Oh, you've got it now.
I got it. Yeah.
I'll be around to have a look at that later.
Yeah, it's good. So then I've got to go through it all. It's time. I just have so little time. And one thing that, unfortunately, I'm talking about when I was 21. When I was 21, I would say 90% of my time was spent. I was thinking about making music, and 10% of my time was spent about boring things like signing on or whatever I was doing at the time. And of course now 90% of my time is spent doing boring things, all my responsibilities in my life, and only 10% doing the creative things, which is a terrible situation. So I'm desperately trying to redress the balance, but as you get older, you get more responsibilities to more people. It's difficult.
But you have been making music. I mean,
Are we at that stage yet?
we're nearly there actually. It's gone quite quick. But I didn't realise I was reading the Quietest piece that John Duran wrote, and where you revealed that you left the music industry in 2012.
Yeah, well, I don't like those big goodbyes, those sad farewells.
You retired from.
Yeah, I
that
put all
side.
my equipment in storage, and I didn't pick up a guitar for something like 8 years, really. I mean, there was an issue. I put out something called Mrs. Mac, but that was done in New York about 2001, just before the towers came down. So that was an old track. But I fell out of love with the music industry. You can understand that, Kev.
Well, you got shafted, didn't you, with nothing? I think.
Yeah,
For a Interscope and
the whole Universal conglomerate thing was quite unpleasant, and I went back to Sony briefly, but the industry was really changing then. And to be honest, another thing which I've not spoken about, but when I started out, I was actually going to quit music when I was 30. That was the plan. That's what I wanted to do. I just thought, or pop music, and I just thought I want to do something else with my life, because it's a big world out there. But of course, time went on, and I ended up doing like almost a 30-year tour of duty, I call it, from about the age of 11 to the age of 40. And so, as I said, I'd left Sony, I went to Universal, went back to Sony. I was not very happy with the state of the music industry, and I just thought, it's also touring cost me a lot of money.
Touring a band's expensive, isn't it? It's
very expensive. And just to give an illustration, I'm not talking about tour support, so you get a lot of tour support from the record company, but out of my own pocket, the money that I lost on tour, something like £300,000. Now that's not a lot of money to you lot, I know that. But over the course of the 3 tours, so it was a case of every time I've gone on stage, it's like going to the ATM and bringing out £1,000 and throwing it at the audience. And I just thought, this is unsustainable. And then people said, well, just go with an acoustic guitar by yourself. I'm like, well, I prefer being in the studio really than on the road. And I loved the tours that we did. It was fantastic bands, great musicians. But it reached that stage where I thought, I missed a lot of my eldest son growing up at that stage. And I just thought, it's time to hang up my what do you call it?
Guns.
Revolvers. Hang up the guns. Yeah.
You're not going to, so there won't be another band tour. It's unlikely, or never say never.
I'd say never say never, because you never know.
Will there be another vocal album? Because you've been doing soundtracks all this time.
Yeah, well,
I've been
enjoying the soundtracks because I took such a lot of time out of music, and in a way, it affected my confidence. Because if you haven't done something for a long time, regardless of what it is, if you're an athlete or a writer or whatever, if you don't do something for a long period of time, you start to think, can I still do it? Can I remember how to do it?
And the industry changes as well.
Yeah, and it's a strange industry, and I started to, and I've been living abroad a lot, and I have children in different countries, so I have a very complicated, in a nice way, complicated personal life, which means I'm spread all over the place. And then I started to, get slight tingling. I wouldn't mind going back in the studio again, so I started to do odd little things. And it's a case of sort of confidence, really, because I really enjoyed the soundtrack stuff, because I've always loved soundtracks. I used to work for a company that did soundtracks. So that's something that I always wanted to do, because I tried to make the albums quite cinematic, and I love cinematic music. I know you're a huge soundtrack fan yourself. And so that was an interesting way in. And I had done various bits and bobs over the years, but with my younger brother, Gerard, establishing his career, we're close brothers, and he's always been a big supporter of mine, and he wanted me to start doing music on his stuff, and also with Johanna, my ex, who's a really good documentary maker. So it started off, small scale, and I started to enjoy being back in the studio again, really. Actually started to remember why I loved doing it. So rather than all the nonsense that goes with the music business, being misunderstood, being caricatured, which is the thing that used to irritate me as well. And I think there's a bit of a class thing there as well. If you're a working class person, you've got something to say. There's an element of that. You're like a cheeky chappy, or prophet of gloom, or I think
like Robbie Williams.
Is that what he is?
He's a cheeky chappy. I don't know if he's a prophet of doom.
Yeah, so that sense of being, turned into a caricature and sort of misunderstood or whatever, you just get a bit sort of bored and tired with it, and you sort of grow out of it actually, and want to do something else with your life. So it was interesting getting into the soundtracks, because I started to feel the passion again. I love being in the studio, and if you were to say to me, you were never, ever, ever going to play live again, I'd be like, okay, fair enough. But if you were to say to me, you are never, ever, ever going to be allowed in a recording studio again, I'd probably start to cry and sob, because I love being in the studio. You know what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But do you like DJing or making records?
I like being at home in the studio too, definitely. There is a different experience between it, but we're not going to get into that here. It's about you, not me.
Okay.
But while we're on the family, we should mention Andy, shouldn't we?
Yes.
Andy
yes,
Dog, your brother.
Yes,
artwork.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of screaming faces, isn't there? A lot of screaming heads.
Yeah, that's
Angst.
more him than me, actually. But it's funny actually seeing bring the Uncertain Smile one out as well. The Uncertain Smile one, which was the first one he did. Now, when I see these pictures here, particularly this one and the Perfect one, I think it doesn't look anything like me, you know. But I saw, I don't know, some magazine found some really old photos of me and published them last week or whatever. I thought, God, I look exactly like that.
It's not a bad likeness. The hair on the back's a bit spiky on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
And Neville Brody did your original leather logo.
Yes, he did.
The two T's upside down, not the Fiona Skinner one, which is
no, that's right.
general
one, because that's your copy, isn't it?
That is my copy. Yes.
He did the original. He did the original. Yeah, and of course that painting is of very.
And this is Fela Kuti's, one of Fela Kuti's wives.
One of Fela Kuti's wives. I don't know which one.
Copied out of an early issue of The Face, I believe.
Yes, that's right. He was drawing. He had it in his studio, and he painted it. And I wandered in one day, and I think I'd obviously just finished the album then, because I saw it. I thought the colours really perfectly matched Giant to me, because that song is in really bright, bold, warm colours. And I just said, well, what the hell is that? And he said, yes, it's a... I saw the picture that he was doing, that he was copying it from the
Do you see sound in colour? Is it synesthesia, or is that...
Oh, no, I don't. I do know people that do, though. Yeah, I do. But so it fitted perfectly. And obviously, as we heard, the Americans then didn't want, you know, an African lady smoking a joint on the cover, so there was a pressure to change.
So they said, just draw a picture of Matt screaming again, eh?
Yeah.
Pricking his finger on a rose on that one.
Yes, there is a lot of screaming. Look at it. I didn't notice it before.
You're a tortured artist, aren't you? Was the Infected cover? That's a tortured artist cover.
Yeah. Maybe it says it. Yeah, it says a bit about me and Andrew, I suppose. The Johnson Boys. Have you seen Gerard's new film, Hyena?
I haven't, not yet.
A great film, but
I heard it's pretty violent.
Well, exactly. Runs in the family.
And so it was released October '83, I think.
Yeah.
And well, you're released into the pop landscape of Wham, Duran Duran, Culture Club, and early Smiths, I think, at that time. How was that received?
Well, how was the album received?
Yeah,
it got good reviews at the time. It did get good reviews, I remember. I think it didn't... I mean, the singles didn't do that well. I don't think they were... I think the album was top 30, but the singles... They were slow burners, really. And I can't remember if I would have been disappointed or happy. I really can't remember. But there was good. There was a positive feeling towards it. There was a good. Actually, do you know where the title "Soul Mining" comes from? You probably know this because you know more about all this than I do.
Well, I always took it to be a pun, which is very unlike you.
Well, it was actually an interview that I did with a chap called Ian Pye at Melody Maker. He interviewed me for Burning Blue Soul, and the title was Ian Pye Goes Soul Mining with Matt Johnson. And I saw I thought, I'm having that.
Yeah.
That'll do very nicely, thank you very much. Which it did.
Did you give it a good review afterwards, do you know?
Ian, well, Ian, I don't know where he was at that point, but he did become editor of the NME later on. I think he only put me on the cover once or twice, because he said, the Smiths were on like 30 times. I said, Ian, come on. I mean, he went, can't have favouritism, you know. Come on.
Unless you're Morrissey.
Exactly.
So we're getting up to date now, really, because we've done the album. I was just going to ask you about future plans, and I know you've got your Sinioda label, which is your soundtrack label, but you've also got your 51st State Publishing.
Yes.
Book imprint.
Yes, in fact, I don't know if any of you have got the Tales from the Two Puddings, the book I published of my dad's memoirs, but I think they're selling them here at Rough Trade. So it's a great read.
It's a great opportunity.
It's a great opportunity to pick one up. But that was great fun doing that with my dad, because obviously I've worked with Andrew, I've been working with Gerard, and then working with my dad, and it was really a present for his 80th birthday.
Because he was a pub landlord.
That's right, he was the landlord of the Two Puddings from 1962 to 2000. And I think he was the longest serving landlord in London at the time. So he'd always written anyway, and he used to write short stories. I thought it would be a nice present, and I really enjoyed editing it, and it actually brought back so many memories. Talking about that, by reading these stories, I was literally in my mind. I was back in that pub. The smell of it, the general atmosphere, the way that it looked, it was incredible, and it did well. The book, you know, got him on Radio 4 at Christmas week. We did a nice event at the Bishopsgate Institute down the road. It did very, very well, and it's a documentary being made about it.
Okay.
And there may be, which is, I can't say anything at the moment because it's early days, but there may be an event in Berlin about it next year as well. We're still discussing that, so it's an interesting project.
And there's plans for the authorised biography, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, Neil's possibly here tonight as well. That's Friday Project, which is the imprint of the HarperCollins. And Neil's someone that I met when I was promoting my dad's book as a book publisher. Neil had recently had a history of East London published. And we got into some interesting conversations and political conversations, and it was his suggestion. It just felt the right thing to do. I think he's going to do a good job. I think it's going to be quite an interesting biography.
Excellent. And you said when you came to write the liner notes for Soul Mining, it sort of flooded out.
Yeah, well, I was only going to write a couple of paragraphs, and then more and more memories started coming out, and I was quite enjoying it, really, and I wanted just to, draw attention to my collaborators as well, who were possibly sometimes overlooked, to say how important all these people were, not just Jules Holland, of course, but Wicks and Jim and Zeke and Thomas and Paul Hardiman himself, because there was a great team of people put together for that project. So, it was important to do that, and it's interesting looking back. I'm a very, very different person, as we all are, very different people from when we were younger. Every cell in the body changes every 7 years, or is that one of those apocryphal myths? I don't know, but I feel like a very, very different person. It's very hard to remember a lot of the time exactly what I was thinking and feeling, apart from I was really, really impatient and ambitious. Because from my point of view, I thought, I've been in this industry 10 years, come on, let's get things moving.
So now it's 31 years, isn't it, technically?
Yeah, because we did miss the...
But, it's a good product, isn't it? It's worth the extra weight. So I suppose the next question on most people's lips is, will they be infected?
It depends if Sony behave themselves. Cough up, give me all my royalties. No, it's a possibility. It's a strong possibility.
With the film as well?
It would be with the film.
Okay.
It would be the film.
There's a lot of material there for infected.
Yeah.
There we go. You're listening, Sony?
Yeah. Okay,
well, thank you very much, Matt. That's Soul Mining for you. We're going to have some questions.
And what a wonderful host. A big hand for DJ Food. Thank you. We were, of course, going to get VJ Dude, but he couldn't. He's your rival.
Couldn't do it. So we're going to have some questions, I think, from the audience. Have we got time? Oh, Jesus.
Oh.
You're ugly.
You ugly bastards.
How long have we got? How long have we got? 20 minutes.
Yeah,
okay, man here in this stripy shirt.
Can you?
It's a present from Norway.
From Norway.
Oh,
Norway. It's a wow hunting kit. Thank you.
This
Thank
man
you
over
very
here.
much.
Have you got a microphone?
Hello, Matt.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, thank you.
I think it's fair to say that your discography is pretty chaotic, spread over different labels, formats. Was the London Town box set an attempt to try and bring that all together? And obviously that didn't happen, so is this new box set another attempt to try and bring the whole lot together and,
I suppose, no, London Town was really for those 4 albums. It was only for those 4. There were going to be 2 other box sets, which was, I think one was called Bedsit Land or something, which was Burning Blue Soul, Porno of Despair, and Soul, and Spirit. But that didn't occur yet. And of course, there was the New York trilogy, which was Naked Self, Gun Sluts, and Karmic Gravity, which I think is a. In fact, I went back to listen to some of that stuff. It's not completely finished, but it's a really strong album. So I do want to do that, but time goes so fast, and when you're very, very busy, it's just finding the time to put it all together. But I would like to to bring all the catalogue out and have it all sort of consistent. That is a dream of mine.
Cool. Well, I think I'll speak for everyone here. We'd love to hear it. So, you know, and we'd all buy it as well. So.
What a guy! So you can't,
Thanks,
a man in a stripy T-shirt. Yeah.
There's the order, Sony.
Excellent.
Anyone else? Man here?
How did the sale of the song Infected get Soul Mine into a bigger audience?
How did?
Infected the song
Yes.
suddenly hit MTV Channel 4 late at night, and then for me personally, I then found Soul Mine.
Oh, okay. I think that happens just in anybody's career, really. You know, if you could be a filmmaker or a musician or a writer, you know, your subsequent works then draw attention to your earlier stuff. But what happened with probably the MTV thing? I did the full-length video, and I was on a program. It was 120 minutes. I can't remember what it was called. Channel 4. Yeah, Channel 4. Channel 4 showed the whole video in its entirety, and it suddenly exposed to a national audience. Yeah, so everybody. So it would have then drew people in, but.
Did that then give it a boost on sales?
Yeah, it would have done. It would have done. It would have done. I don't know the exact figures because Sony keep them under lock and key.
With your royalties.
With the royalties, they're buried in a field somewhere.
This man here in blue?
Hi Matt. Somewhere between Cold Spell Ahead and Uncertain Smile, I've got a recording that's really, really bad. Not a bad song, but a bad recording, which you'd probably die listening to. I've been waiting for tomorrow all my life with Uncertain Smile in the same song. Do you remember this? Because it's re-listening to actually.
You sure it's not?
No, I'm not.
Cold Spell Ahead and.
Well, it might be Cold Spell Ahead and I've been waiting for tomorrow, but it's like one verse of one verse to the other. Really bad. Played live somewhere, probably in your garage. Yeah,
it could have been in the marquee.
No, it was before that. It was 81 or something. 81, early 80s.
One for another box set somewhere.
So basically, I have the only recording of this on the planet. Is that it?
Yeah, I can't remember.
It's good though. You should try and put them together again. You know, reissue.
It's an early mashup, is it?
It kind of is, yeah, you know.
Anyone else? Man with the tattoo?
Sorry about that earlier. In fact, everyone's got a tattoo. I'm the only one here that's not.
Man in the green jacket, sorry.
Yeah, when are you playing? No. Speaking from a younger audience, how do you feel about the younger artists such as John McClure and Peter Doherty with the old political views on songs carrying on?
Well, I don't know much about their work, to be honest, because when I got out of music, I sort of cut off. I've never read music press. I don't listen to the radio. I'm not that. Well, actually, the one lyricist who was more of a poetess that I heard that I liked was Kate Tempest. You know her stuff?
Yeah.
She impressed me. I thought that was terrific. But I've not. It's not really brought to my attention any political songwriters that I really.
Well, Radio 1 won't play either of them, so they probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're off to a good start.
Yeah.
Does anyone listen to Radio 1 anymore? Oh, no. Radio 2.
Radio 2.
51st State t-shirt man.
Do you have a line on the I saw the light in the building when
on the Chrysler building.
Oh my fucking it's pushed on the.
You know
Do
what?
you have the secret line there?
No, I was wearing very slippery shoes that day, and I nearly come off. No, the story is, I can reveal it now. Well, you probably know anyway. It wasn't me. It was a stunt man, and the funny thing was,
Stunt Matt.
It was a stunt man. There was a funny story about this because we didn't even have permission. You wouldn't get up there now because that was pre 9/11, so you're not allowed up there at all now. But we managed to get up there. We also had a Vietnam veteran circling in a helicopter, and the guy. This is no joke. The guy that was security guy was sat there watching. I think it was the Super Bowl or something. He was sat there eating popcorn, watching the TV. So we managed to sneak past him, and we did that. And the stunt guy, he was an English guy. I didn't think he looked like me, but they said he looks just like you. And I was kind of insulted when I met him. We sat in the room beforehand, and he was shaking. He looked very pale and grey. I said, "You're right, you're not going to." He went, "Actually, fires are my speciality, not heights." That's true. He was more scared than I would have been, and he was on the cable, and he stood there. He's not moving very much, as you. He's standing like that, but terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. You wouldn't get away with that today, would
No,
you?
you couldn't. They're very strict with the security. Now, in fact, they were livid. When the crisis had been found out, we said we were just going up there to do some recceing. And they found out, I think, yes, they banned everybody going up there after that. They were livid, but we got it.
Man, open the call. This man here.
Hi, am I imagining it on Kids TV, when you were promoting songwriting, Swap Shop, did you give away one of your precious keyboards?
Yes, a Yamaha CS05, and I want it back.
Super fan over here.
They're worth a fortune now, those things. They're great, those little... In fact, that was the bass on Waiting for Tomorrow and a lot of the album. That was a nice little keyboard.
Who got that then?
I don't know.
He's got it.
Has he got it? Who's got it? Oh, you've got it?
I think the guy in the 51st Day t-shirt's got it.
Yeah, well, I want it back.
Anyone else? No, I'm going to go for someone at the back. Black t-shirt there, that's him. Yes, you.
Yeah, please don't take offence at that, you know. Everyone gives me filthy looks, but my mum wouldn't let me have a tattoo either, or a moped, so. Can you say it again? Yes. How did it come about? Was it just for you? Oh. Well, you do have the same haircut as Sinead and I had at the time. I actually first heard or saw Sinead. I was in a record company office in Boston somewhere, just lying around in between interviews, sort of getting bored, looking at the MTV or something. And there was a video came on by a band called World Party, and I think she was singing backing vocals. In fact, I don't think I could even hear her singing, but there was something about her. She wasn't known at this point. I thought, God, there's something about that girl.
Beautiful woman, bald head.
Well, yeah, something like that.
Full bin there.
Yeah, exactly. And then, what was her first album? The Lion and the Cobra. That came out after that. And we had the same lawyer, this chap John Kennedy, who I mentioned earlier on, who was the CBS lawyer. And I heard that album. I thought, it's fantastic. She was so fresh and full of vitality and passion. And also, her viewpoint on institutionalized religion was not that dissimilar to my own at that point. So I contacted through John, and we met up, we got along, and she came down to the studio and sang. She was a fantastic singer, very, very easy to work with in the studio, actually. She was very, very self-aware. You know, she'd do a take and she'd come back and she was very, no, that wasn't the take I just did, it was the take before, blah, blah, blah. She was very, very focused. And we did have a bit of a fallout after that, actually, because when I come to release singles from that album, Armageddon Days got banned because of the Salman Rushdie affair, so I was in a bit of a pickle. That was supposed to be the first single. We went with Beaten Generation, but we didn't have another single, so we wanted to go with Kingdom of Rain.
I always was amazed that was never taken
Well, she wouldn't allow it to be.
Oh.
We had a big argument on the phone. I was in New York, and I said, she was being very difficult, and I phoned her up and said, Sinead, come on. She said, what did she say? You're just trying to exploit me. I said, Sinead, I would have gone with Madonna if I'd have wanted to exploit anyone. But I said, I approached you before you were even known, you know, this is really unfair. But she was very... The problem is, fame does terrible things to people's personalities. It's a terrible thing. The ego, the narcissism, and it's not anybody's fault. It's like being exposed to radiation. You know, very few people, myself included, really cope very well with it. You know, which is probably one of the reasons I distance myself a lot of the time.
You
Because
lose perspective. Basically.
yeah, and people around you act differently, and then you fall out with all your friends and your family. Then you surround yourself by yes people, and your head swells. And so she was just going through that phase at the time, you know, and which was a bit unfortunate because it would have been a good single. We did a video for it and everything, but that was the story.
You
of that.
did a video?
Yeah, there was a good video actually. Tim, we did it in Brooklyn, I think.
Okay. Mind Bomb box set, anyone?
Oh,
That would be good.
yeah.
And the dust one. There, one at a time. Got to get to infected first. Anyone else?
He's been waiting.
This
for
guy
that.
here, he's been waiting all.
He's
Yeah.
been waiting for.
We were talking about collaborations. I particularly enjoyed your collaboration with Mark Hall in Mark and the Madness, especially
Yeah.
the track Angels.
Oh yes,
I
yes.
was wondering if you could just talk about that, how it got together.
With Mark, well, Mark was obviously a label mate at Some Bizarre, and Mark was very, very encouraging to me from Sunday. He's a lovely guy, Mark. I've got only nice things to say about him. And of course, we met, you know, in the early days. I think when they'd released Memorabilia. I think we may have even done a gig with them, supporting them up in Nottingham. I can't remember what the venue was called. Rock City, is it? Is it Rock
Yeah.
City? And they were great guys, Mark and Dave, actually. And so we got to know them through the Some Bizarre connection and Steve. And then, of course, their career really started to take off. As I mentioned, Phonogram signed B-Movie. Really, they wanted B-Movie. They got Soft Cell as a bit of a part of the job lot, but Soft Cell really took off. They were massive. And Mark was very, very kind and very encouraging to me when I was starting. Always have a nice, kind word for me. And of course, at that stage, he's also somebody that likes to really follow his own path. You know, he was certainly not afraid to. You know, the record company wanted him just to carry on with more and more hit singles from Soft Cell, but he thought, no, I want to do something else. I want to sort of just experiment. And he put together another band, the Mambas. There was Annie Hogan, Steve James Sherlock, who was previously with me, and a few other people. And I got involved on that, and he asked me to write some songs. I think he also wanted, because he was so used to working with Dave, he just wanted to feel what it was like to work with other people, really. But it was a pleasure working with Mark. He's a lovely guy. We still keep in touch and see each other occasionally, but he's a very nice man.
Did you tour with the Mambas, or did you just do studios?
No. I did do one gig, which was at the Duke of, it was down St Martin's Lane. Is it the Duke of Cambridge or Duke of York? Yeah, that's it.
I think he was there, weren't you?
Were you there? But yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
Any more? Any more? I think we're running out of time.
Just quick.
I'm gonna.
Oh.
No, you've had one already. Go on. Yeah.
What I was going to say was, before the Versus the World tour, you did the black and white videos. Are they ever going to see the light of day?
Oh.
Well, I saw it at the
The Mind Bomb. Oh, you mean Gravitate to Me and Beaten Generation? If there is a Mind Bomb box set, they would be part of that, along with the Versus the World. So they would all constitute part of it. The reason there isn't any video element to Soul Mining, because there was only one video that was done for it, and it happens to be the worst video of all time. And I've got an Afra.
Perfect, is it?
No, This Is the Day, and I hate that video. And I ordered that it was destroyed years ago, and then YouTube comes along and it's all over the place. So it's a horrible video. But
Go and look at it later.
yeah. It was all shot on video, whereas the later ones were shot on film. That's when I was finding out about the difference between film and video. On that chapter. Oh, sorry, Kev, I don't want to.
No, it's your gig, not mine.
I have a really simple question. But I asked fans around as well, but what is the emphasis underneath the E in leather? Why is there emphasis?
Oh, you mean in the logo?
Yeah, in the logo. Why is there
I tell you what, you know, people often ask about the pronunciation.
yeah,
The correct pronunciation.
in the new is like you tried a lot of logos in the new. We look at it and you know, a
It's
lot
like-
of tryouts for logos.
How much has he had to drink?
But you have a lot of tryouts for logos.
Last orders, please.
With no one with underline on the E.
Okay. Well,
Stands on the E.
Matt is about to tell us how to pronounce the.
Yeah,
And this
so-
guy wants to know about the number under the. Go on.
That's a lot
No,
of
it's-
tryouts.
to her. We never knew that. TVTV.
I thought it was E.
The E, the E,
Oh,
yeah.
tit from Yorkshire.
Exactly. Tut.
Tut tut.
So,
Have we got time for any more? Come on, yeah, Spencer, please.
This kind of feels like a bit of a rebirth for you. You've done the quiet interview, you're doing this tonight, box sets coming out. I mean, although you've been working, doing film soundtracks, etc. Is that how it feels for you?
I tell you what it is. Is it Spencer?
Yeah, Spencer, yeah.
The man with the
Spencer,
nice
yeah.
headphones. It's a toe in the water, Spencer, to see how I feel about it, really, because, like I said, I fell out of love with it all, and as far as I was concerned, that was that. But obviously, you know, the never say never. I think it's important words to live by, really. It's sort of a toe in the water, and it's been really lovely to see such a warm response to the record, and to know that it means a lot in people's lives. And this was always the most important thing, really. As I mentioned in the liner notes, you know, for me as a songwriter, beyond all this sort of fame and celebrity nonsense that can get tangled up in people's careers, and even the critical acclaim, and when we all love people to like our stuff, we don't want to be hated, but the most important thing is the people that actually buy the music and listen to it and really understand it. It seems corny and a cliche, but that's actually true. And I think that's what it's the people that buy the records and listen to the records and take them to heart. They're the people that remember you. You know, you're not remembered through the reviews. Reviews come and go, and the celebrity nonsense comes and goes. But that's the important thing. So for me, a toe in the water. I do feel a bit like the prospect of them making a fully fledged comeback. It's a bit like one of those old tennis players, you know, that have the little wooden rackets, and they come out and they're up against these guys with these big carbon graphite things. I think, would I be able to go through all that?
I don't think you need to. You've got enough material in the cupboard to put out.
He's been through my.
There's
cupboard.
enough albums
I knew
unreleased.
that you'd been there.
So, you know, forget the remasters. There's enough stuff that
It's
we
not
never
called
even
DJ Food for nothing.
digging into the archives. Is that a pretty good place to stop?
I think
One
it
more?
is, yeah.
Or one more? Matt, you pick.
Oh, one at the right at the back. That chap with the hand. Yes.
Chap with the hand.
Well, there was an interesting story which people know about, which a collaboration that almost happened but didn't happen was with Tom Waits, actually, because he was going to be one of the producers on Infected, which would have been interesting. Because I had approached Holger Schuke. This was after coming off Soul Mining. People said, "Why didn't you work with Paul again?" And I love Paul, but being a very restless, ambitious person, I was always trying to, you know, swim against the tide and move in different directions. Holger Schuke wrote to him but didn't hear back. Brian Eno was another one I approached, who came back quite lukewarm. Was just like, well, I like Soul Mining, but I'm not sure. And then Tom Waits, who came back very, very enthusiastic, actually. And so I flew out to New York and spent, which was very good of the record company. They paid for me just to go to New York for a week to hang out with Tom Waits.
You just check your royalty statements.
Well, again, that's why. Another reason I've never
It all came out of them.
But Tom took me to some fantastic studios. He was working on Rain Dogs at the time, and he introduced me to Robert Frank, which was incredible now thinking about it. And they were staying at the Chelsea Hotel, and they took me to this amazing, I think it was the old RCA studios. I can't remember which one it was in New York. Really, really, really old. A lot of those old studios are gone now. And we spent a lot of time together, and too many things were happening in his personal life. You know, he basically said, "Look, I think your demos are very explicit." He said, "I think you should produce yourself." Now that would have been interesting, really. I think, and at the moment, I can't say there's anybody that think about it. Obviously, I've just collaborated with Kev here, which was very interesting. Oh, and if you don't have a copy of that, by the way, make sure it fits perfectly in the box set, the giant 12-inch. We left room for it, and Kev will even sign it for you if you behave yourself.
Thanks, Matt.
So,
And thank you, Matt Johnson.
thank you very much. Thanks for coming down.